After several uncompetitive seasons, this year I was determined to prove that I could win in Gridlife's street class. I left, quote, no stone unturned. We're leaving no stone unturned in our pursuit of speed, swapping in a barely legal HKS turbo, paradigm-shifting billet drop knuckles, and a horde of components from Australia, the fastest continent. I spent a great deal of time on the simulator, sharpening my own speed, car control, and track knowledge, and all of this paid off. For each of the 3 events I competed in, I achieved the same result: a class win and a class record. Unfortunately, there was another pretty consistent result: a broken car.
I did 2 hot laps, and this is what we got going on. I have broken 4th gear again. Hey, the turbo's shot.
Look at that jaggedness.
Originally, I had planned to compete in 4 events to give me a chance to claim a season championship, but during the very first event of the season, shortly after setting the class record, I broke my 6-speed transmission. The Evo was simply making too much power for the 6-speed Mitsubishi equipped it with. This was actually the second 6-speed I'd broken in this car in the exact same scenario. The only logical option was to upgrade to a stronger, more resilient 5-speed transmission. But with me doing the swap myself, the process took long enough that I missed my second event at New Jersey Motorsports Park. Now, I'd only be able to make it to 3 events. The second event I was able to participate in mid-Ohio made up for missing New Jersey. I was able to beat the perennial street class champ, Josh Halka, in a head-to-head fight, and did so with a perfectly reliable car. But all the while this season, I was working to fix problems caused by the distinctly non-street car aspects of the Evo. The built motor trapped large amounts of oil in the head and filled catch cans on track, which led to the very cool pump return system I used all season. A cool fix,
and that is the pump cycling on,
but a bit ridiculous for a street class car to be essentially running a poor man's dry sump in order to turn laps. In order to fit the massive custom catch can I used to hold the oil before it was pumped back into the oil pan, I had to relocate the battery to the trunk. Not very street car. And I swapped in an oil-starved proof sump pan from New Zealand that cost about $1,500. Infinite Evo made a super high quality product, but again, super overkill for a street car. Leading up to my third and final event at Lime Rock, I wasn't concerned at all about winning the event.
All I have to do this weekend is put down 1 lap faster than anybody else, and I'm in the Hall of Fame.
None of the other highly competitive cars in the class would be there, so I considered my victory a foregone conclusion. I was actually worried it would be boring without people to battle. Going out for the first session of the weekend at a brand new track, I took it very easy, only turning 5 sighting laps without pushing hard to shake the car down and feel out a new track. On the second session, I had every intention to set a real quick time until my turbo exploded, filling my intercooler with the chunks of metal you see here. At first, I thought my built motor had finally let go.
I think it blew the motor.
An assumption I greeted with the resigned acceptance known all too well by cancer victims and Evo owners. I was happy to find that the issue lay not with the engine, but with the aftermarket turbo I'd installed just earlier that year.
That's what we've got. There's a ton of shards of turbo fins in the intercooler, and hopefully the engine is okay, but who knows. If particles small enough made their way through the intercooler, then
There's a lot of bubbles, but actually I don't see debris.
I am still in first place somehow, and there was only one session left in the weekend. However, my competition is extremely close, so let's go take a look. One of the closest competitors I've got this weekend. Ed, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing badly because my car is broken, but you're doing much better.
Yeah, my turbo still works.
So he's got this Civic Type R over here. Honestly, way more car than I have. Kind of running away with the class. I think it's a little bit unfair.
Stock engine, bolt-ons, so intake, intercooler, exhaust, downpipe, and every sort of cooling mod possible.
So how much horsepower are we making?
Maybe 330 horsepower, maybe 340. It's a low, not that much horsepower. It's not like you.
And how much does it weigh?
3,250 probably without me, so it's probably like 3,400 pounds.
My car makes 455 horsepower, and it weighs 3,200 pounds with me in the car.
Yeah, I still have air conditioning. So I still have an air conditioning. The only thing I took out was the back seat. So yeah, pretty much a street car. All right? The whole street class thing has gone out of proportion. All right, I think.
My other competitor, in a very familiar chassis, a white Evo 9. Yeah. A white Evo 9. This one is an RS, the lightest weight model of the Evo. And this is Kevin Kerr. How's it going, Kev?
All right, how's it going?
How much horsepower is this thing making?
It makes 360 right now.
360. What dyno was that on?
That was on a dyno jet.
So I've got about 100 horsepower on Kevin here. Again, the disparity of the builds in street class is extremely wide.
The event wound up being much more exciting than I had anticipated, and I waited with bated breath to see if any of my competitors could string together a time that could beat my reserved effort from session 1. In the end, no. With one pretty bad lap, I took first place in street class for the weekend ahead of drivers who had spent the whole weekend turning lap after lap in their street cars. This doesn't seem right. If I were some kind of driving prodigy, Tommy Mackinnon, reborn in the body of an Asian man, so skillful behind the wheel that my most minimal effort was enough to win a weekend, that would be one thing. But I'm no athlete. I think I'm a competent driver, but certainly nothing exceptional. There's many drivers on my level or above at any given club race weekend. It's the car. The car was technically legal in street class, able to mop the floor with cars I'd much more realistically label street cars. Now, yes, any car with a registration that you drive on the street could technically be called a street car, and I did drive the Evo to Alaska.
It is so nerve-wracking because virtually anything could fail.
But I believe you have to interpret the spirit of the class and where it exists in the hierarchy of the time attack competition structure to truly define a street car. Gridlife and Global Time Attack have tiered competition structures that are based on vehicle platforms and modifications, which ultimately reflect the times that those cars are able to do. Gridlife classes range from Sunday Cup, which only allows B-spec compact cars, all the way up to Unlimited class, which allows anything. Classes like Club TR, Track Rat, exist to funnel people into Gridlife's wheel-to-wheel series, and the cars have very limited mods allowed, but still two-way suspension and aero is permissible. To be remotely competitive, you'll basically need a dedicated race car built to the edge of the rulebook. And unless you want to race with less than 100 horsepower, Sunday Cup isn't an option for you. It's got a pretty narrow window of legal cars, not typically the cars that enthusiasts trying to get into motorsports are driving. They're usually driving Evos, or WRXs, M3s, Civics, Golf Rs, Mustangs, Zs. You know exactly what I'm talking about because you probably have one. And for those enthusiasts trying to get into competition, Gridlife designed an entry-level class fittingly named Street Class, denoting the type of car one would compete with in the class. A street car. When you actually drive on the street, something you could buy, throw some sway bars and a tune on, and go chase times with your buddies. To me, this is the entire premise of the class, but that's not what it's become. Of course, with anything competitive, people will try and find an advantage. There becomes a meta. Evos are the fastest car, or Subarus are the fastest car. Barring a spec series, there will always be inequality in a class like this, but I think that's what makes it fun. Seeing how platforms stack up to one another in a racing environment, marveling at the results a great driver can achieve even in a seemingly slower car. That's a great thing. What I don't believe Street Class should be is an arms race or a money fight. A class with a prerequisite to drop $10,000 in mods in order to place in the top 10. You shouldn't need a big turbo to come within 15 mph of the top contenders. This is meant to be a place where street cars come and compete, not get waxed by cars built beyond the initial concept of the class, regardless of whether the rules allow for it or not. I did this myself because I wanted to win, but I knew the whole time I was only doing it because it was technically allowed. It didn't feel right. It doesn't feel good to drive your heart out and still come second to a car that only turned one lap all weekend. And I don't believe that you should have to make your street car a nightmare to drive around town in order to be remotely competitive in street class. I decided back when my turbo blew up at Lime Rock that I'd be swapping back to the original OEM turbo I'd been running on the car previously, probably a 20 horsepower loss. This would certainly not negate the advantage that my car has, but it's something. Since then, the rules for Street Class have changed, and turbos like mine are essentially banned anyways. However, now, two-way suspension has become legal. I think this is a poor decision for Street Class, and I'm sponsored by a suspension company. Who's driving around in their Honda Civic with two ways and external reservoirs? Why render cars without $2,500 suspension essentially powerless to compete in a class that's designed to be an entry-level competition? Obviously, I don't have a lot of room to talk. I helped break Street Class and may have dissuaded people from trying to come and compete because a YouTuber who literally spends money on cars for his job is in the class.
I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble with Gridlife.
That's why I'm trying to make the Evo a bit more of a street car again. If rules are updated to ban my drop knuckles, that seems completely fair. They're very expensive and no one would run them on the street car. If rules were made to limit power to weight ratio, that again seems very fair. I believe the goal of Street Class is accessible competition, to give us one more thing to do with the cars that we're also passionate about already. That's why I'm making my race car slower. If rules were to force further regression of my build, I'd probably just stop running the Evo in Street Class because I've spent way too much money to go back, but I'd love to bring another chassis out to compete at that point. And if you're wondering why I don't just swap to a bigger turbo in that case if I'm already fine with leaving the class, it's because I don't need more than 400 horsepower in this car. It's perfect with a stock turbo. Absurdly fast on the street and a weapon at the racetrack with limits I've still got to learn to push. And this is all while being much closer to a relatable, realistic, true street car.
Yeah. Thank you.